Okay, so I'm going to kind of touch on, summarize a little bit what Greg talked about and pull in what Ray talked about and add in just another couple of comments about harvesting. So just kind of bear with me here. Okay, so we talked about flooding and the effects of flooding early, late, the flood waters that stood over the pond for a week or 3 weeks, how that affected it. Right now, today, you probably should have just a shallow flood on your pond. 10 inches is good, because as that water gets bad, it gets low in oxygen, you can change out 10 inches a lot quicker, a lot faster, a lot cheaper than if you had 15 or 20 inches of water right now. Okay, so right now, before the harvest season, you don't need, deep enough water to float a boat. You just need enough water right now for the crawfish to come out. So a shallow flood is good for right now. I would wait till you're ready to actually start fishing, maybe a week or so before you start fishing, bring the water level up to a fishing depth. But for right now, a shallow flood is good. Okay, flush as needed. You can't look at water and tell that there's a bunch of oxygen in it. It could be clear, it could be cloudy, it could be muddy. Just by looking at the water, you can't tell. There is a little chemistry kit. Ray, hold up that little black box right there. For about 55 bucks, you can get one of these little oxygen test kits. You get 30 different tests in there. Good thing is these things actually can go through the flood. That kit right there is still wet. It's drying out because my office got flooded. But the test still works. But that'll tell you if your oxygen is really low or if you're good. Obviously, if the oxygen is good in the pond, you don't need to spend $200 or $300 pumping. You can wait till next week. But the other thing that I quite often get is, well, every Monday I start to pump. Well, that doesn't mean that you're going to save all your crawfish. Because if there's a lot of straw, a lot of dead grass, whatever, rotting in the water, okay, you pump on Monday and Tuesday, okay, by Thursday or Friday it may get bad enough to kill crawfish. And for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, any little baby crawfish that come out are going to die. Okay, and then Monday you turn on the pump again. Okay, and you're going to tell me, Mark, I pumped every week, so I should have plenty of crawfish. I did exactly what you told me. I don't have crawfish, so you don't know what you're talking about. Well, the thing is, if there's so much rotten stuff in the water and you pump just once a week because you look at the calendar or whatever, or you look at the field across the road, you're not pumping when you need to. So a test kit like this will tell you if oxygen's real low. Maybe you pumped it on Monday. The first couple of times you might have to pump on Thursday or Friday. Okay? Then the next week, maybe that flood will last maybe 6 or 7 days. Maybe a third batch of water might last, 10 or 12 days. Okay, until you finally get cooler weather and toward the end of November or end of October, November, when it's cool enough and it's not rotten as bad and your water stays good for a while. So don't get into a habit of just turning the pump on every Monday or whatever and thinking that you're automatically saving all those crawfish, because probably you're not. But flush as needed right now for the rest of October. Try to flush the water through there and keep it as good as possible. And like Ray was saying, you want that first batch of October babies to survive during this mild temperature in October, November. They can make a big growth spurt, and you're going to be catching some of those in December, January. If you kill that first batch and you're waiting for that November batch of babies, it's going to be later and it's not going to be good. Okay, flooding shallow right now. Yeah, you're going to tell me, well, the birds are going to eat you up. Okay, the big flocks of becrosh. Okay, yeah, you need to scare them out. You're not supposed to kill birds. Okay, it was always somebody says, well, you can shoot them, and as long as you don't pick them up or make a gumbo, it's all right. No, if you shoot any of these birds, the ibis, the becrosh, the egrets, seagulls, whatever, you will get a ticket. But especially don't kill the whooping cranes, okay? How many of y'all have seen a whooping crane in your crawfish ponds? Okay, some of the cranes like Evangeline Parish. I mean, y'all very hospitable here. There's 36 cranes still flying around Louisiana right now. There have been a couple that were shot over the last few years. A couple of those cases were just kids that they saw a big white bird and said, I bet you can't hit that. Oh, yeah, I can. And they shot him. Hopefully none of y'all are in that mindset. But let's kind of be aware that some of those big white birds out in the field may be the cranes, and we certainly want to protect them. But if you do have a big flock of beckrosh, a couple of hundred beckrosh fly in, yeah, put some popcorns out or shoot around them, but don't kill them, but chase them out. But the other point I wanted to make about the birds is that that's something that you see. Okay, like what Ray just talked about the fish, how many fish do you see in that pond? If you got a 50-acre pond, how many fish per acre do you have, each of them worth a sack of crawfish? That's a lot more damage than a few cranes or a couple of hundred ibis. So just think about that. Okay, as far as flooding, some other things, monitor your ponds. Get a dip net and get one of these test kits, check your water, dip around, see if your baby crawfish are there. If your baby crawfish disappear, okay, why did they disappear? If they were there last week but they're gone this week, what happened? Was it some kind of chemicals? Last year we had some issues in Acadia and Iberia Parish with some mosquito spraying. I don't think y'all had any problems here in Evangeline or St. Landry, but ag chemicals, nobody's spraying right now for insects. All that's over with. The cane, they're spraying just the ripener stuff, the glyphosate. Any of the herbicides are not going to hurt crawfish, but insecticides, that will kill them. Okay, so things like karate, or if you'd be spraying for stink bugs in soybeans, which would have been back in August or so, that can wipe out crawfish. But right now, for the rest of October, November, you're really not going to have a problem with chemicals. The white spot disease, that's something we've only seen that in the springtime. Usually sometime in March when the weather starts warming up, we've seen that white spot. Last year we had just a couple of cases statewide. It's still out there. If you see some crawfish dying, when you empty the trap on the table and crawfish are just not moving, they'll pinch you but they can't let go. That could be white spot. And that white spot tends to hit just the mature big crawfish. So when you dump out that trap, all the small immature crawfish are kicking, they're pinching, they look healthy. It's your bigger size crawfish, they'll be dying. But that's going to be something to look for in the spring. If you see that, you can send some crawfish to the LSU vet school. They can run a test for it and give you a positive yes or no if that was it. But the scientists right now, they really don't know if the virus is changing or the crawfish are becoming more immune to it. But for the last several years, like I say, we've only seen a couple of cases of white spot virus, and hopefully we're not going to see any this year. Just a couple of words about harvesting and trap density. How many traps do you have? For the most part, all the farmers I visit probably are fishing not enough traps to effectively harvest that whole crop. Usually people are running maybe 10 or 12 traps per acre. It kind of depends on the density of crawfish or how many crawfish you have. Potentially, if you have a really high producing pond that could produce 1,000 or more pounds per acre, yeah, you ought to be somewhere around at 18 to 20 traps per acre. That's a lot of traps. Okay, but again, we got some economists from LSU that put the pencil to it. And they can show you that if you're catching a lot of crawfish, and there's a lot of crawfish in the pond, that $9 trap, if you put another $9 trap, in a couple of days you pay for that trap, and then beyond that, it's going to be all gravy. It's going to be profit. Okay? If you have a real light population, some of these ponds are affected by the flood, and maybe you're only going to catch 4 or 5, 600 pounds to the acre. Yeah, in that case, yeah, you're probably looking at 10 to 15 traps per acre is probably sufficient to harvest that volume. That's kind of the ballpark of if you're expecting a field that it's been in crawfish for 2 or 3 years, population just is getting more and more, your size is getting smaller, a lot of peelers, you need to fish that thing hard with as many traps as you can and sell those crawfish for as long as Doug will buy them, as long as they can handle them. But you're never going to actually fish out a pond just with trapping. Ray has tried that many times at the rice station. They've tried it at the ponds over in Baton Rouge at LSU, and you can't fish hard enough to actually dent the population enough. Something else, trap spacing. This is kind of the layout. If your rows or traps are 40 by 50, you have about 22 traps per acre. If your lines are 60 feet apart, traps are 40 feet apart along the road, you have 18, and so on down the line. So 12 traps per acre, you have 60 by 60. So I don't know how y'all lay out your lines, particularly here in Evangeline, y'all got all these contour levees. Yeah, I don't see too many straight lines here. I see a lot of crooked lines. But however you fix it, you know, put them, space them out to where you have about this many traps per acre. Let's see, bait management and trapping frequency. Just a couple words on that. Right now, probably a quarter to a third of a pound of bait per trap is all you need. Sometimes I see people using a lot more, especially the fish. They'll put a whole fish just because it's easier not to have to cut it. But that's cutting into your profit. If you're putting a half a pound of fish or more, I mean, you're putting some of your profit, you're wasting that profit in bait cost. Trapping efficiency, or the number of times you trap right now during November, December when you start fishing, think about what's out there to catch. Okay, you have some of those early crawfish that hatched, some of those October babies, a few of them are just barely getting big enough to stay in the trap by end of November, December. You have whatever holdover crawfish, all those mom and daddy crawfish that came out of the burrows, that's what you're catching first in the pond. Okay, so the holdover crawfish, you're not going to catch a lot of them, but with a higher price, you catch some and make it worth your while. But again, kind of look at your individual pond, or if you got several ponds, look at which ones are producing. Some may take 3 times a week, maybe every other day, or some can only produce maybe twice a week. So kind of keep some records and keep track of your catch. I know you kind of do it from day to day, but look at it from week to week and even for the whole month. Look at your catch and also watch the weather factors and try to fish when you're more likely going to catch a lot of crawfish, and don't fish when the weather's such that you're probably not going to catch a whole lot today. It's going to be rainy and cold and nasty. You don't want to go out fishing anyway, so kind of back off on it. But try to fish as smart as you can during the winter time. You want to catch as much as you can of that high-priced crawfish, but also don't waste your bait and your labor and effort on days that you're not going to, you're barely going to break even. So with that, I'll kind of open it up to discussion, get Greg up here and Ray, and if you got some questions, we're going to try to answer, and kind of like what Greg said earlier, whatever we say about crawfish, most of the time it's right, okay? But I'm sure everybody in here is going to think of one year or one pond that's going to be an exception, and we acknowledge that. And just like you, the research community, we know we don't have all the answers yet. We know a lot of the details, and the way I like to look at it is if you're a gambler or whatever, if you do everything right, okay, probably 8 years out of 10 years, if you do everything according to the book, you're going to produce crawfish and make a profit. Okay, if you start flooding up for teal season when it's hot, you flood up too deep and all that stubble and straw is rotting in the water. You got bad water at the end of September, early October. Okay, now maybe you're only going to produce crawfish maybe 6 or 7 years out of 10. Okay? Okay, so the more you do wrong, the more chances of making a profit, you lose those chances. Okay? And everybody knows that Mother Nature can grow crawfish no matter what you do. And probably 3 or 4 years out of 10, Mother Nature's going to make crawfish in spite of whatever you do. Okay? But on the other hand, you're in this to make money. Okay? So if you do everything right, or as much as under your control, when you flood it, how you stock it, how you manage the food supply, how you harvest it, if you do everything as efficiently and effectively as possible, probably those 8 years out of 10, you're going to make money. But again, Mother Nature's going to throw you a flood like she did this year. And so this might be the 1 or 2 years out of 10 that you may break even or you may not even make money. But that's how I look at it. Okay, some questions about what we just said. Yes?
How effective is an aeration system? Like some people put expanded metal.
Okay. Aerators make a big difference, okay, for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you're pumping out of a well water has 0 oxygen. If you test it with that little test kit, it's going to be 0. Okay, coming out of the ground, 0. It's nice cool water. It's about 68, 70 degrees temperature. If you break up that water into little tiny droplets over a screen, okay, you can get, what, Greg, about 7 parts per million.
Depending on the temperature outside.
It depends on the temperature. Okay, when the temperature is hot, if you're pumping water,
You still get 5.
yeah, you still get 5. Okay, if it's coming out of just a riser, I've measured it before and I only get about 2. Okay, so with that screen, you can get twice or almost 3 times as much oxygen for the same dollar that cost you pumping. Okay, so a screen makes a big difference.
It's not the same effect, like if it's bouncing on top of the water, it's not the same effect?
It's adding a little bit, but think about it. When you have a glob of water the size of a golf ball, just the outside of that water is exposed to the air. And this air we're breathing has 210,000 parts per million. It's a lot. We're trying to get 6 in the water. Okay, so if you take that golf ball and you split it up into 10 billion little tiny droplets, each of them has a surface area and it's going to catch on some oxygen. So the more you can break it up, okay, so take that expanded metal, maybe the top layer have 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch, maybe that next level have even smaller screen. Okay, so if you drop it over 2 layers of screen, you'll get up to that 6 or 7 parts per million out of that well water. Okay, coming from the canal. If you're pumping out of a canal or bayou, okay, for 2 reasons. Okay, you want to build that screen with some sides because you're going to get fish coming in. You get some little tiny, baby fish or even some eggs that without a screen, they're going to get into your pond and eat up all your baby crawfish. Okay, number 2, that water in the bayou, it may or may not be all that good either. It may be only 2 or 3 parts per million oxygen. Okay, and it's probably 78, 80 degrees. Okay, so you put that over the screen, bubble it up real good. You can go from 2 probably to about 5, maybe 6. Okay, but either way, you're adding a lot of oxygen to it. Now, how fast does that oxygen leave? That's the other thing. Okay, If you're pumping over your field that has some rice stubble with a bunch of straw, you just flooded this week, okay, it's rotting very fast. I mean, it's as fast as you put oxygen in, it's sucking out. So you may have to pump every day to try to replace it. Oxygen can leave that water, get used up within hours, not weeks, hours. Okay, that second or third batch of water, once that stuff is rotted initially, it slows down. So it's rotting very slowly. Okay, so by the second or third batch of water that you put in there, you know, it may last a week or 10 days. Okay, but so it really kind of depends on what's in the field at the time. That's the other good thing about, you know, Ray and all his research on planting rice for crawfish forage. When you have a green rice plant, an aquatic plant standing in the water, and little or no weeds, nothing to rot, you can flood up and forget about it. That green plant is not using up oxygen. In fact, even some of the lower part of the stem and leaves are actually giving off oxygen with photosynthesis. So you just maintain your water level. Maintain that shallow flood on that green rice, and you don't have to flood. You don't have to pump and circulate. But compared to that field that has a lot of rotten, dead stuff, yeah, it may take you almost continuous flooding to keep it fresh enough for those babies to live.
What you consider a shallow flood?
A shallow flood, 6, 8, 10 inches, you know, is good. 10 inches is probably getting deep enough that the beckrosh are kind of getting their butt wet if they're walking in there. If you're only 4 to 6 inches, yeah, you'll probably attract a lot of birds to get in there. But, you know, yeah, right now 8 or 10 inches is sufficient. Any of those mama crawfish that Greg talked about in their burrows, they're going to come out and they got enough water they can drop their babies and they'll start growing. And the ponds I was looking at this afternoon down in Vermilion, yeah, there was some that were, you know, 1/4 inch falling through my net. There was some 1/2 inch, there was some 3/4, and a couple of them that were about 1.5 inches or 2 inches. So that's good. You see in different batches. The other point that both Greg and Ray were making, you know, you get these different waves of babies. It's good when you're dipping to see different sizes, because you know you got several sizes coming up. Later on in the harvest, you're going to see almost a continuous harvest or just little dips. If all you see is one batch of babies and there's nothing following them, okay, later on during the harvest season, you're going to hit that peak of when those crawfish are sizable to catch. And once you catch that bunch of brothers and sisters, there's nothing to follow them. So your catch drops off.